It was 2:34 p.m. on a crisp November afternoon in 2025 when the interruption sliced through the Senate hearing room like a dull knife through warm butter. Jasmine Crockett, the sharp-witted congresswoman from Dallas, had been testifying for exactly 41 seconds before the Senate Committee on Economic Mobility. Her words were measured, backed by hard data on wage stagnation in manufacturing hubs, explaining how the proposed worker protection bill could lift low-income Americans out of systemic poverty. It was a testimony rooted in evidence, challenging the notion that working-class woes were merely cultural quirks rather than the result of entrenched economic policies. The room, filled with senators, staffers, and a smattering of press, hummed with the usual procedural drone. C-SPAN's live feed hovered at around 52,000 viewers, most expecting a dry discussion on overtime regulations and minimum wage tweaks. No one anticipated the spark that would ignite political fireworks. Then came the voice, smooth, condescending, laced with that unearned certainty men in power often wield like a birthright. Madam Chair, point of order. It belonged to Vice President JD Vance, presiding over the Senate in his largely ceremonial role. Most VPs skipped these sessions, deeming them tedious and unproductive. But Vance was there deliberately, his presence no accident. He'd been gunning for Crockett ever since she'd publicly dismantled House Speaker Mike Johnson's credibility 3 months prior in a viral congressional exchange. The chamber fell into an uneasy hush, the kind that signals a breach in protocol. Committee Chair Sherrod Brown, the veteran Ohio Democrat with no affection for his home state's former junior senator, glanced up, irritation etching his features. "The Vice President has the floor," Brown conceded, "though I'll note this is highly irregular during witness testimony." Vance leaned forward in the presiding chair, embodying the persona he'd honed over 8 years, a rumpled suit that screamed modesty but cost a fortune, a tie that balanced respectability without ostentation. His net worth exceeded $7 million, amassed through Silicon Valley venture capital gigs managing billionaire fortunes. Yet he projected the image of a relatable everyman. "Madam Chair, with all due respect to Congresswoman Crockett," he began, the word Congresswoman dripping with patronizing undertones, as if reminding her of her supposed place. He shifted, adopting his folksy Ohio drawl, the one that thickened for cameras and faded in boardrooms with tech moguls or Manhattan fundraisers. "I think we need to pause and recognize something important here." The accent was a tool calibrated for audience appeal. Some members of Congress, particularly those from urban areas like Dallas and Los Angeles and other coastal cities, simply don't understand the values, the concerns, the lived realities of working-class Americans. They come here with policies designed by think tanks and progressive activists, policies that sound good in PowerPoint presentations, but don't reflect how real people in real communities actually live their lives. Republican senators nodded in approval, lapping up the script Vance had perfected since Hillbilly Elegy, his bestseller positioning him as the Yale-educated oracle of Rust Belt woes. He eyed Crockett directly, his gaze laced with dismissal. "Having grown up in Middletown, Ohio, having lived the struggles that I wrote about in Hillbilly Elegy, having worked alongside the forgotten men and women of the Rust Belt before I came to Washington, I can tell you with certainty that the policies being proposed here today reflect a fundamental disconnect from the people they claim to help. Perhaps the gentle lady from Dallas should spend less time lecturing about working Americans and more time listening to them. Perhaps she should consider that her urban perspective, however well-intentioned, doesn't translate to communities I come from, the communities I represent, the communities I understand in ways that coastal legislators simply cannot." The GOP side murmured satisfaction, some genuine, others cynical, all eyeing the Fox News clips in the making. VP Vance defends working Americans, or Crockett's coastal elite perspective challenged. Democrats shifted uncomfortably, wary of countering faux populism without seeming aloof. Chair Brown began to interject. "Mr. Vice President, Congresswoman Crockett was invited to provide testimony in your interruption." But Crockett, unflinching, smiled. It was that prosecutor's grin, the one signaling an adversary's fatal misstep. Beside her sat 4 folders, red, blue, green, gold, compiled over 4 weeks by a team including ex-Congressional Research Service analysts, a Yale Law student thesis expert on Vance, and investigative journalists eager to share dirt on his finances. "Thank you, Mr. Vice President," she said, her tone shifting from policy analyst to courtroom inquisitor. "Thank you for that illuminating perspective on who understands working Americans and who doesn't. That was incredibly helpful framing for what comes next." The room tensed, electricity crackling. C-SPAN viewers surged to 89,000 in under a minute as social media buzzed with shares. Vance smirked, convinced he'd scored a populist win. He was oblivious to the trap. Crockett locked eyes with him. "I appreciate the Vice President's passion about understanding working Americans. Given that he interrupted my testimony specifically to question whether I understand their lived realities, their values, their concerns, and given that he invoked his own background, his own book, his own claimed authenticity as the genuine voice of working-class struggle, I think it would be valuable for this committee and the American people to examine that authenticity in detail." She paused, letting the challenge sink in. "I'd like to invite Vice President Vance to step down from the chair and take the witness table. Since he's raised questions about who truly understands and represents working Americans, let's examine the record, his background, his policies, his votes, and see who actually serves working people and who just performs authenticity while serving entirely different interests." The silence was deafening. Brown looked stunned. Protocol didn't allow for summoning a VP like a common witness. Republicans exchanged shocked glances. Is she serious? Democrats perked up, sensing a masterful pivot. Vance's expressions flickered. Surprise, irritation, calculation, settling on faux confidence. He believed his Hillbilly Elegy armor was impenetrable. "Congresswoman," he chuckled, the laugh defensive despite its intent, "I didn't come here to testify. I came to preside over Senate proceedings and offer perspective when members seem disconnected from the Americans they're supposed to serve. I'm the Vice President of the United States." "I understand your title, Mr. Vice President," Crockett replied evenly, still underlying her calm. "But you just interrupted a congressional hearing to personally question my understanding of working Americans. You invoked your background, your book, your claimed authentic connection to struggling communities. You positioned yourself as the one who really understands while dismissing me as an out-of-touch coastal elite. So I'm simply asking, are you willing to have that authenticity examined? Are you willing to defend your claimed understanding of working people against documentation of your actual record? Or do you only feel comfortable lecturing others without being questioned yourself?" The trap closed. Refusal would paint him as a hypocrite. Acceptance meant facing her arsenal. Yet Vance, steeped in his self-mythology, couldn't fathom the threat. He'd built a career on unassailable credentials, a poor kid-turned-success story. "Fine," he said, rising with a smirk. "If the Congresswoman wants to waste committee time questioning my credentials to speak about working Americans, I'm happy to set the record straight. My life story speaks for itself." Those words would haunt him. He descended to the witness table, his curated everyman attire on display. Brown, seizing the moment, administered the oath Vance insisted on, raising his hands solemnly for the cameras. "I want the American people to know I'm here truthfully, transparently, with nothing to hide about my background or my commitment to the people I represent." Crockett's expression turned flat, focused. The prosecutor's mask. She picked up a document from the blue folder, a page from a book, holding it for cameras. "Thank you for taking the oath, Mr. Vice President. Since you interrupted my testimony to suggest I don't understand working Americans, and you do, let's examine the foundation of that claimed understanding. Let's look at what you've actually said about working-class people, what you've actually done for them, and who you actually serve." Crockett placed a page on the table, ensuring its text was visible. "This is page 140 from Hillbilly Elegy, your 2016 memoir, that you invoke today as evidence of your authentic connection to working-class struggles. I'm going to read your own words directly from your own book." She met Vance's gaze, then read clearly, "We spend our way into the poorhouse. We buy giant TVs and iPads. Our homes are cluttered with toys and games. We choose not to work when we should be looking for jobs." End quote. Those are your words, Mr. Vice President. "We choose not to work." You literally wrote that poor people in Appalachia choose not to work. that their poverty is a choice. She retrieved another marked page. Page 243. There's a lack of agency here, a feeling that you have little control over your life, and a willingness to blame everyone but yourself. You wrote that working-class people lack personal agency and blame others for their problems instead of taking responsibility. A third page followed. Page 89. What separates the successful from the unsuccessful are the expectations that they have for their own lives, suggesting that poor people are unsuccessful because they don't expect enough of themselves, not because of systemic issues like deindustrialization, corporate offshoring, trade policies, or economic structures. Laying the pages in a row, Crockett pressed, Mr. Vice President, your book, the one you invoke today as proof of your authentic understanding of working Americans, explicitly blames poor people for their own poverty. You wrote that they choose not to work, that they lack personal responsibility, that their struggles are fundamentally cultural and personal rather than economic and systemic. Is that an accurate reading of your book? Vance shifted, his smirk fading. Hillbilly Elegy was a personal memoir examining complex cultural factors. Yes or no, Mr. Vice President? Crockett cut in, commandeering the exchange. Did you write those words I just read? Words that blame poor people for choosing not to work and lacking personal responsibility. A pregnant pause. I wrote about cultural factors that I observed. Yes, Crockett affirmed. You wrote them. You blamed poor people for their poverty. You told wealthy coastal elites, because that's who bought your book, not struggling people in Appalachia, that working-class struggles are their own fault. You made $4 million selling that narrative. $4 million telling rich people that poor people deserve to be poor. She let the figure linger. So, when you interrupted my testimony today to suggest I don't understand working Americans, I have to ask, does someone who blamed them for their poverty in a best-selling book really understand them? Or did you just monetize their suffering while telling a story that comfortable elites wanted to hear? Vance attempted a retort, but Crockett surged ahead, pulling from the green folder. Let's talk about who you actually are, Mr. Vice President, versus the identity you perform. Because you positioned yourself today as someone who understands working-class struggles through lived experience. Let's examine that lived experience. She displayed an academic transcript. You graduated from Yale Law School in 2013. Yale Law, one of the most elite institutions in America, with current tuition at $85,000 per year. You didn't just attend. You graduated, spending 3 years networking with the children of billionaires, studying under professors who charge $10,000 per speech, accessing opportunities available to perhaps 300 people per year in a nation of 330 million. Setting it down, she continued, I'm not saying you didn't earn that opportunity. I'm establishing who you became at age 25, an Ivy League graduate with elite credentials and connections. That's your actual lived experience from 2013 onward, not working-class struggle, but elite access. Next came a corporate bio. After Yale, you worked at Sidley Austin, a corporate law firm where starting salary was $190,000 per year. You represented corporations in gleaming office towers where lunch costs $40 and clients are Fortune 500 companies. That was 2013 to 2014. Still your lived experience, still elite. Another document. Then in 2016, you became a principal at Mithril Capital, Peter Thiel's venture capital firm. You invested money for billionaires, deciding which tech startups got millions in funding. You attended conferences in San Francisco and Aspen where the least wealthy person was worth 8 figures. Typical VC principal compensation, $700,000 to $2 million per year. That was 2016 to 2017. 2 years making more money annually than most of your childhood neighbors made in a decade. Building a timeline, she added. In 2019, you founded Narya Capital, your own venture capital firm. SEC filings show it raised $93 million from investors. You managed those investments, taking a percentage of returns. By 2021, when you ran for Senate, your personal net worth was estimated at $7 million. That's not working class, Mr. Vice President. That's the investment class, people whose money works for them rather than working for money. Spreading the documents chronologically, Crockett summarized. So, let's be clear about your actual lived experience for the past 12 years. Yale Law graduate, corporate attorney, venture capitalist, firm founder, multimillionaire. Those are facts. That's who you've been since age 28. You haven't worked a working-class job in over a decade. You haven't worried about rent or groceries or medical bills or any of the daily struggles that define working-class life. Your lived experience is elite schools, elite firms, elite wealth. Leaning forward, her voice sharpened. Yet you interrupted my testimony today to suggest that I, a woman who worked her way through law school, who practiced as a public defender and civil rights attorney, who represents a diverse working-class district in Dallas, don't understand working Americans, while you, a venture capitalist with $7 million net worth funded by billionaires, do. Can you explain that? What about making millions in Silicon Valley gives you authentic understanding of working-class struggles? Vance's composure cracked, his face reddening. My childhood experiences were 20 years ago, Crockett interjected. Your grandmother's struggles were a generation ago. Your childhood poverty ended when you joined the Marines, got military benefits, went to Ohio State on the GI Bill, then Yale on scholarship. By age 25, you were elite, and you've been elite ever since. You spent longer as a millionaire venture capitalist than you spent in poverty. Your current identity is elite. Your current life is elite. Your current interests are elite. The working class background is a costume you wear for political purposes, not a reality you live. She lifted a legal filing. And speaking of costumes, let's talk about your name. You were born James Donald Bowman, correct? Vance squirmed. My mother remarried. You took your stepfather's name, Hamill, for some time. Then you legally changed your name to Vance, your grandparents' name, specifically when preparing to publish Hillbilly Elegy and launch your public career. You chose JD Vance because it sounded more Appalachian, more authentically working class, better for brand you were building. Even your name is a marketing decision, Mr. Vice President. James Bowman, Yale Law graduate and venture capitalist, doesn't sell books. JD Vance, authentic hillbilly voice, does. You manufacture your identity, literally down to what you're called. The room was pin-drop silent, cameras clicking furiously. C-SPAN hit 167,000 viewers, Twitter trending with hillbilly fraud. Vance watched his persona unravel, exposed by his own biography, undeniable facts he couldn't refute. Crockett pressed on, her momentum unyielding as she transitioned to the red folder. Now, let's discuss consistency, Mr. Vice President. Because authentic people, people with genuine principles and real convictions, tend to be consistent over time. Their core values don't radically reverse based on political convenience. So, let's examine your consistency. She arranged a timeline with quotes and columns. Let's start with your views on Donald Trump. Since you're currently serving as his vice president, I'm going to read your own words from 2016 during Trump's first campaign. These are documented in text messages, interviews, and public statements. Reading from screenshots, text message to Josh McLaurin, August 2016. I go back and forth between thinking Trump is a cynical or that he's America's Hitler. That's a direct quote. You compared Donald Trump to Hitler. Another, interview with Charlie Rose, October 2016. I'm a never Trump guy. I never liked him. You identified as never Trump. An op-ed, The Atlantic, October 2016. Trump is cultural heroin. He makes people feel good for the moment, but he's very bad for them long term. You called him heroin. Building the pattern. Private Facebook message, July 2016. Trump is just a bad man, a morally reprehensible human being. You called him morally reprehensible. One more. NPR interview, July 2016. Trump makes people I care about afraid. Immigrants, Muslims, minorities. He makes them feel like they're not part of America. You said, he made vulnerable people afraid. Laying out the 2016 quotes. Those are your words from 2016, Mr. Vice President. Hitler, never Trump. Cultural heroin, morally reprehensible, making people afraid. Not taken out of context, not misquoted. Your actual documented positions 8 years ago. Shifting to recent years. Now, let's look at your statements from 2021 to 2024 when you decided to run for Senate and needed Trump's endorsement. New quotes. Fox News interview, July 2021. I was wrong about Trump. He was the best president of my lifetime. Campaign rally, May 2022. President Trump's policies helped working Americans more than any president in 50 years. Breitbart interview, November 2022. Trump understood the working class better than anyone. VP acceptance speech, July 2024. Donald Trump is the greatest leader this nation has seen since Abraham Lincoln. Crockett item. From Hitler to Lincoln, from cultural heroine to greatest leader since Lincoln, from morally reprehensible to best president of your lifetime. That's not growth, Mr. Vice President. That's not evolution or learning or having your mind changed by evidence. That's a complete, total 180-degree reversal of every stated conviction within 18 months of deciding you wanted political power. The only thing that changed wasn't Trump. He's the same person. What changed was your ambition. She paused. Can you name a single principle you actually hold consistently? One value you wouldn't reverse if it became politically convenient. Vance responded, My views evolved as I saw Trump's policies in action. Evolved. Crockett's tone sliced. You called him Hitler, then called him Lincoln. That's not evolution. That's opportunistic transformation. You didn't develop new understanding. You recognized he had power, and you wanted access to it. So, you reversed every principle you claimed to hold. That's not authentic. That's calculated fraud. Undeterred, she continued with policy flip-flops, pulling voting records. Let's look at policy positions, since you like to claim you consistently fight for working Americans. Healthcare. In 2016, you wrote in an op-ed, Medicaid expansion is crucial for working-class communities with limited access to care. Then, as senator in 2023, you voted against Medicaid expansion for Ohio. You reversed your position. Why? Because opposing became Republican orthodoxy, and you serve your party, not your principles. Environment. In 2016, you said in an interview, climate change is real and affects Appalachian communities through flooding and extreme weather. We need reasonable regulations. Then as senator, you voted against every environmental protection measure, against EPA regulations protecting water quality in coal country, against climate initiatives. Complete reversal. Why? Because environmental protection threatens your donors in extractive industries. Labor rights. In a 2016 interview, unions built the middle class, and we should make it easier for workers to organize. As senator, you voted against a PRO Act that would protect union organizing, against card check, against every pro-labor legislation. Total reversal. Opioid crisis. In Hillbilly Elegy, you wrote extensively about how addiction destroyed your community, how it was a systemic crisis requiring massive intervention. As senator, you voted against expanded funding for treatment programs, against regulations on pharmaceutical companies that pushed opioids. When given a chance to actually address the crisis you profited from writing about, you voted no, because it would affect your pharmaceutical industry donors. Spreading comparisons. Here's the pattern, Mr. Vice President. On literally every issue, Trump, healthcare, environment, labor, addiction treatment, immigration, trade, education. You said one thing before you ran for office, then did the complete opposite once you got power. You don't have principles. You have political calculations. You don't have authentic beliefs. You have focus group positions. You're not consistent. You're opportunistic. Now to the gold folder. Let's talk about who funded your political career. Because you interrupted my testimony to lecture about understanding working Americans and fighting for forgotten communities. So, let's examine who actually paid for your political power and what you did for them in return. FEC forms in hand. Your 2022 Senate campaign. Total fundraising approximately $32 million. Expensive for an Ohio race. Let's look at where that money came from. A breakdown chart. Peter Thiel, your former employer at Mithril Capital. $15 million through his super PAC, Protect Ohio Values. $15 million from one billionaire. the single largest donation to any Senate campaign in 2022. You weren't running a campaign, Mr. Vice President. You were the beneficiary of a billionaire's investment in buying a Senate seat. More records. But it wasn't just Teal. Your top 20 donors, venture capitalists, hedge fund managers, tech executives, private equity partners. David Sachs, your tech colleague, $650,000. Mark Andreessen, venture capitalist, $400,000. Executives from Google, Facebook, Amazon, all donating maximum amounts. Your campaign wasn't funded by working-class Ohioans. It was funded by Silicon Valley billionaires who you see as your colleagues and still are your bosses. The pattern. And here's what's fascinating. You ran as a populist, campaigning against coastal elites, talking about fighting for forgotten working class. And you were funded almost entirely by coastal elites, by the exact people you claimed to oppose, because they knew something important. Your populism was performance. Your real loyalty was to them, and they've been proven right. Cross-referencing votes. Let's look at what you did for your billionaire backers once in the Senate. Tax policy. You voted for tax cuts that overwhelmingly benefited the wealthy. The top 1% got an average break of $51,000. Working-class Ohioans got maybe $800. Your billionaire donors saved millions. Your constituents got crumbs. Who did you serve? Tech regulation. When legislation came up to regulate big tech, addressing monopolistic practices, data privacy, algorithmic manipulation, you voted no every time. Protecting Google, Facebook, Amazon. Your donors, not your constituents who get exploited by these platforms. Who did you serve? Corporate accountability. Legislation for stronger enforcement against corporate fraud, misleading investors, exploiting workers. You voted no. Protecting corporate interests. Your donors' interests, not working people's. Financial regulation. Voted against regulations on private equity, hedge funds, venture capital disclosure. Protecting the industries you worked in that fund you, that made you rich. Who did you serve? Systematic now. Labor rights. Voted against minimum wage increase, paid family leave, stronger overtime protections, easier union formation. Every vote against workers, benefiting corporations and wealthy donors. Healthcare. Voted against Medicaid expansion covering 600,000 Ohioans, against drug price negotiations lowering costs for families, against protecting pre-existing conditions. Every vote benefiting pharmaceutical and insurance companies, your donors, at the expense of working people's health. A comparison chart. Here's the pattern. Your top 10 campaign donor industries. For each, I track your votes on affecting legislation. Tech, 93% their interests. Pharmaceuticals, 91%. Finance, 96%. Energy, 89%. Corporate interests, 94% average. Know what percentage you voted for legislation directly helping working-class Ohioans. Higher wages, better benefits, stronger safety nets, affordable health care, worker protections? 23%. 23% for your constituents, 94% for your donors. Crockett set the chart down for cameras. You don't represent working Americans, Mr. Vice President. You represent the billionaires who bought you a Senate seat and now own your votes. You're not a populist. You're a puppet. You're not fighting for forgotten. You're serving the people who can write seven-figure checks. Every vote proves it. Every policy position confirms it. You sold out the people you claim to represent. And the receipts show exactly what they got in return for their investment. One more document. Vance's financial disclosure. And let's talk about your personal investments. Since filing as senator, you own stakes in companies that offshore American jobs. You personally profit when manufacturing moves from Ohio to Mexico. You have investments in union-busting companies. You benefit financially from the economic trends devastating working-class communities. So when you lecture me about understanding working Americans, I have to ask, how does personally profiting from offshoring their jobs demonstrate understanding? How does voting against their health care, while voting for tax cuts for your donors, show authentic representation? How does taking $15 million from Peter Thiel, then voting his interests over theirs, make you their voice? The room hung heavy, C-SPAN at 231,000 viewers. Trends like billionaire's puppet exploding. Vance's populist facade crumbled under undeniable financial ties. But Crockett saved the most visceral for last, returned to Hillbilly Elegy with a hardcover copy. Pages marked. "Let's return to Hillbilly Elegy," she said, her tone edging toward genuine indignation. "Because that book is the foundation of your entire political identity. You invoked it today. You reference it constantly. It's your credential for claiming to understand and represent working-class struggles. So, let's examine what that book actually says and who it actually served." Opening to Marx. "I read this book very carefully, Mr. Vice President, multiple times with highlighter and notes, because you've made millions from it and built a political career on it. So, let's look at what you actually wrote." Page 140. "We spend our way into the poorhouse. We choose not to work when we should be looking for jobs." Your thesis: poor people make bad financial decisions and choose not to work. Page 243. "There's a lack of agency here, a willingness to blame everyone but yourself." Your thesis: poor people lack personal responsibility and blame others. Page 89. "What separates the successful from the unsuccessful are the expectations. People who believe they have no control will never truly control themselves." Your thesis: poor people are unsuccessful because they don't expect enough from themselves. Setting it down, she added reviews. "Now, who was this book written for and who did it serve?" You published it in June 2016, as Trump won the nomination. Media scrambled to understand white working-class voters supporting him. Your book provided an answer coastal elites wanted. New York Times, a compassionate analysis of the poor who backed Trump. Washington Post, essential reading for understanding Trump's America. NPR, explains the white working class in the current political moment. The Pattern, this book was marketed to and consumed by educated coastal elites wanting to understand working class struggles and Trump support. And your answer, the one making you millions, was that their poverty is cultural and personal. They lack responsibility, make bad choices, blame others. That's convenient for wealthy people. It tells them poverty isn't their problem, not caused by deindustrialization, trade policies, corporate offshoring, wage stagnation, union destruction. No, it's poor people needing to work harder, make better decisions. Your book gave wealthy people permission to feel morally superior while doing nothing. Sales figures. Hillbilly Elegy sold over 3 million copies, earning you approximately $4 million in royalties. You became a celebrity, got a Netflix deal, commanded $50,000 speaking fees. You built a media brand on Appalachian poverty. But you didn't use that money or platform to help those communities. No programs for addiction, no job training, no fighting corporate policies destroying jobs. You monetized their suffering, then did nothing. That's not understanding. That's exploitation. Community statements. Let me read responses from the communities you claim to represent. Appalachian Voices. JD Vance does not speak for our community. Hillbilly Elegy perpetuates harmful stereotypes blaming poor people for systemic economic devastation. Kentuckians to the Commonwealth. Vance profited from our stories while advocating policies that harm us. His book is poverty tourism for elite consumption. Ohio Valley Resource Center. Vance's narrative ignores corporate greed and policy decisions destroying our economy while suggesting our struggles are our own fault. He exploited our pain for personal gain. Appalachian Studies Association. Hillbilly Elegy offers simplistic cultural explanations for complex economic problems, ignoring systemic causes. It has done more harm than good. The communities you claim to represent reject you, Mr. Vice President. They see Hillbilly Elegy for what it is. A grift, monetizing poverty while blaming victims. A story making wealthy people feel good about inaction. Senate votes again. And this is the most insulting. You use that celebrity for politics, voting against those communities every time. Wrote about opioids, made millions, voted against treatment funding. Wrote about struggling families, voted against Medicaid. Wrote about economic devastation, voted for billionaire tax cuts instead of community investments. Her voice rose. You monetize their suffering, blame them, build a career on their pain, then abandon them with power to help. That's not authentic representation. That's cynical exploitation. You're not the voice of working-class America. You're the person who profited from their struggles while doing nothing worse, actively harming them. Gathering documents. Let's step back and look at the complete pattern. This isn't about individual inconsistencies. It's about identity authenticity, who someone really is versus who they pretend to be. Groups arranged. The identity you sell, working-class Appalachian, authentic hillbilly voice, fighter for forgotten Americans, populist against coastal elites. The reality, Yale Law graduate elite for 12 years, $7 million venture capitalist, billionaire-funded politician, voting donor interests 94% of the time, Silicon Valley insider. Consistency, you claim principled advocate rooted in community. Reality, complete reversal on every position for convenience. Trump from Hitler to Lincoln, no principle too sacred. Independence, you project populist outsider. Reality, purchased by Teal for $15 million, funded by elites, voting record-serving donors over constituents 4:1. Understanding, you claim unique insight from book and background. Reality, blame poor for poverty, made $4 million selling to elites, built career monetizing suffering, voted against help, not understanding, exploitation. Standing, folders in hand. Every element of your public identity is manufactured. Your name changed for branding, accent for politics, working-class costume on a millionaire, populism funded by billionaires, principles abandoned, representation serving donors, authenticity completely fake. Holding Hillbilly Elegy, this book symbolizes your career, claims authentic memoir, actually Yale graduate's narrative for elite consumption, monetizing poverty while blaming victims, building celebrity without help, launching power used for wealthy over struggling. You wrote, "The real problem is us," meaning poor people. But your record shows the real problem is people like you, exploiting struggles for profit and power, performing authenticity while serving elites, claiming representation while voting against needs. Directly, you interrupted me suggesting I don't understand working Americans, but I'm not the one blaming them. Funded by exploiters, voting against their needs, profiting from suffering then abandoning them. You're not authentic, you're manufactured. Not populist, a fraud. Not voice of working America, a billionaire's puppet in hillbilly costume. Folders down with finality, and the receipts prove every word. Silence absolute. Vance stunned, anger simmering. Chair Brown. Does the vice president wish to respond? This is clearly a coordinated political attack. Coordinated by whom? Crockett. By your book, FEC forms, voting records, interviews. I didn't attack, I documented. If your record undermines you, that's your character. Vance, my commitment is genuine. Your record shows 94% against working Americans, 94% for donors. That's betrayal, not commitment. Vance stood, I'm not going to sit here and be subjected to character assassination. Nothing distorted. Every document authentic. Verify it all. Read Hillbilly Elegy. Check votes, donors. The receipts are public. Pause. You can leave now, Mr. Vice President. We're done. Vance exited. Cameras capturing his defeat. Persona in tatters. Within 90 minutes, the video became the most watched political content across platforms. Twitter exploded with hillbilly fraud, trending globally at over 4 million tweets, alongside billionaire's puppet, fake populist, and Vance exposed. C-SPAN's full hearing video racked up 7 million views in 2 hours, with clips of key moments, the book readings, donor breakdowns, flip-flop timelines, final dismissal, shared endlessly. YouTube channels uploaded the session with titles like VP JD Vance destroyed by his own record, and Jasmine Crockett exposes a hillbilly fraud. Watch a manufacturer identity collapse in real time, hitting 12 million views by day's end. TikTok saw younger users crafting explainers on Vance's donor ties and votes, titled How to Spot a Fake Populist, reaching demographics he courted via podcasts. Cable news led with a story. CNN verified donations with experts. MSNBC fact-checked flip-flops. Even Fox struggled to defend, unable to refute Vance's own words and records. Appalachian responses were sharp. Local papers in Ohio, Kentucky, West Virginia ran editorials. He never spoke for us. The Hillbilly Elegy fraud finally exposed how JD Vance exploited our suffering for profit and power. In Milltown, Ohio, Vance's hometown, small protests erupted, signs reading "Hillbilly Fraud." Sold us out for Silicon Valley, and he got rich, we got abandoned. Residents told reporters. We never felt represented by him. Religious leaders who'd endorsed Vance as a Christian voice issued statements. We're reviewing concerns about consistency between stated values and actual votes. Christians must hold to authentic representation, not performative populism. Vance's team issued a statement at 6:23 p.m. Vice President Vance is proud of his record fighting for working Americans and will continue advocating for the forgotten communities he comes from. Today's hearing featured a coordinated partisan attack that deliberately misrepresented his background, his book, and his legislative priorities. The Vice President's commitment to the values in Hillbilly Elegy remains unchanged. It was mocked universally, vague, addressing no specifics, repeating platitudes Crockett had debunked with evidence. Conservative media defenses floundered. Class warfare by urban elites failed against Vance's elite ties. Democrats threatened by his appeal ignored donor lists. Attack on Success missed a fraud angle. None stuck. The documentation was ironclad. Polling hit hard. Vance's national favorability dropped 11 points in rapid responses. Among white working-class voters, 14 points. In Appalachia, 18 points. Ohio approval plummeted from 51% to 38%, underwater in his 2022 strongholds. GOP strategists panicked anonymously. This is catastrophic for our working-class messaging. If Vance is seen as a billionaire's puppet, it undermines our populist strategy. We can't have our VP as the face of fake populism. Democrats capitalized. Campaigns cut ad with hearing clips, text overlays. He claimed to represent you. His donors own him. His votes prove it. 2 weeks later, Trump admin damage control sidelined Vance. No rallies, no speeches in working-class areas. He appeared at elite fundraisers in New York and San Francisco, protesters chanting, "Real hillbilly or fake populist? How much did you pay for him?" Investigative journalism surged. ProPublica analyzed Vance's portfolio, revealing profits from job offshoring firms. Washington Post uncovered undisclosed Teal benefits. Speaking fees, book promo, VC funding. New York Times investigated the making of JD Vance. How Silicon Valley created a political persona, detailing Teal's manufacturing of Vance as a product. Hillbilly Elegy sales spiked critically. Readers highlighting victim blaming. Book clubs discuss manipulation. Appalachian groups published Reading Hillbilly Elegy Critically, a viral guide debunking stereotypes. Ohio State protested a scholarship fund. We don't want association with someone exploiting poverty while voting against help. Political fallout. 3 GOP senators whispered 2028 ticket concerns. 2 donors flagged Vance as liability. Focus groups showed working-class betrayal. I thought he was one of us. Turns out he used us for rich people's power. Conservative think tanks scrubbed Elegy from lists. AEI removed his page. Heritage stopped citations. Jasmine Crockett emerged as a Democratic powerhouse on economic justice, trusted more on working-class issues than Vance. Irony noted. Invited to unions, rallies, Rust Belt colleges, her message. Real representation means action. Real understanding means policy. Real authenticity means record matches rhetoric. Publishers bid for her memoir, Authentic Voices, exposing fraud and fighting for real working-class power, hitting high 7 figures. 3 months on, Teal distanced. Mr. Till's investment was based on policy alignment at the time. No ongoing role. Tech billionaires ghosted Vance. Toxic, failed investment. Vance's media tour backfired. Interviews fixated on hearing specifics. His responses defensive. Meet the press. Host read elegy blames, showed anti-help votes. Explain the disconnect? Vance stammered on complex considerations. Approval stabilized low. 38% national underwater, 41% among working-class whites, 35% Appalachia. Vance became shorthand for fake populism. Pulling a Vance, claiming authenticity while serving billionaires. Vancing, manufacturing identity. 2028 replacement discussions intensified. His authenticity was his value add. Without it, he's just a puppet. Ohio Democrats recruited a union leader challenger. Real Ohio, not fake populism. Trump sidelined Vance to ceremonies, funerals, ribbon cuttings. Elegy taught in sociology as exploitation case. Netflix added warnings. Considered removal. Hillbilly Elegy effect. Caution for monetizing poverty without aid. 6 months later, Till San Francisco office, Vance discussing pivot. Dropped working class performance, embrace business friendly. Salvage mode. Hillbilly brand finished. Value now to donors, but compromised. Middletown. Hostile. Face erased from mural. Library shell book. Town hall. He got rich calling us lazy. Did nothing to help. Resident. I believed him. Felt used. Crockett's D.C. office. Folders framed. Meeting unions on real policies. Union protections, wage hikes, accountability. On hearing, he built on fake authenticity. Receipts showed reality. That's accountability. Real work, helping exploited communities. Broader impacts. Fake populism tougher. Scrutiny on donor rhetoric gaps. Vance test. Does policy match performance? Working class voters wary of manufactured authenticity. Demand real service records. Shift to systemic solutions over cultural blames. Campaign finance reform momentum. Teal Vance for billionaire puppets. Donor disclosure key issue. Lessons. Can't build on manufacturer authenticity. Receipts crumble it. Can't represent while voting against interest 94% time. Record doesn't lie. Can't profit from suffering. Blame victims. Claim voice while abandoning. Can't serve billionaires pretending to fight for workers. Donors. Votes tell truth. Can't reverse principles for convenience. Shows fraud. Authenticity needs consistency. Record matches rhetoric, policy performance, service values. When prepared challenger exposes gaps. Fraud collapses. Not destruction, revelation. Costume off, puppet. Strings shown, exploitation unmasked. The hillbilly was always venture capitalist in drag. Folders red, blue, green, gold. Receipts as words, votes, donors, book. Exposure systematic, undeniable. Manufactured identity collapsed. One man's career on fake authenticity. Blaming poor while profiting. Taking billionaire money claiming anti-elite. Reversing principles. Voting against represented. Learned. Performance fails when documented reality meets sunlight.